The clock principle. By disrupting the anticipated timing of your opponent's techniques or objectives, you can take control of the outcome.
Right? Because everybody gives themselves a certain amount of time.
Yeah, there's like an expected.
It's going to take me 3 seconds or 2 seconds.
There you go.
And we disrupt it.
Disrupt it.
So velocity was us using the change of time to outsmart our opponent.
Yes.
And for our advantage.
And the clock principle, we also call it clock control, is us essentially disrupting their attempt at any velocity plays. But even if they're not using them with the speed of like fast, slow, just a move where you have...
Which they aren't in most cases.
Most cases they're not, because they're not learning principles like you guys. But for the most part, someone starts any technique and they have a plan for how long that technique, what it would take to start the technique, and then how long it'll take to be successful applying the technique. And when you disrupt that timing, it frustrates, it burns their energy, and it also gives you the opportunity to control the remaining time or essentially the rest of the completion of that technique that they were not capable of starting without your permission. So we're really disrupting the clock in so many ways.
And we talk about disrupting the clock with this principle, the clock principle. And how does it relate to the distance principle?
I think it's similar, but it's just relative to time.
Correct.
It's a similar version, but time.
So the distance principle has to do with control.
Yes.
That's what you have to be explained before.
Yes. So what the distance principle is to control and distance, the clock control is to timing in the fight. We're disrupting effectiveness by disrupting the ideal timing that the opponent has in their mind and in their spirit and in their anticipated execution of a technique. We're just not letting that timing play out the way they would like to. And the analogy that I think of sometimes is, imagine if you had a clock in your house that every time you looked at it for reference, it was 10 minutes slow. And as a result, right, 10 minutes slow, 10 minutes slow, 10 minutes slow, which means you would be 10 minutes late to every party you went to, every gathering, everything. And imagine another clock in your house that was 10 minutes fast. Always fast clock. And as a result, you always show up to every party 10 minutes early and nobody's there. Your life is thrown off because things aren't happening on the clock that you expect. Now, there's only one thing worse than a slow clock or a fast clock. And that is a clock that sometimes is 10 minutes slow and the same clock that is sometimes 10 minutes fast.
Hey, you imagine that.
There you go.
When you think you figured it out, you haven't.
You haven't. You look at it one day, it's 10 minutes slow, you show up a little bit, everything's off. And then this next day, you look at it again, you say, okay, it's 10 minutes slow, so I gotta be there 10 minutes early. Then you get there and you realize that it's 10 minutes fast. So now you're 20 minutes early to the same party.
Confusion.
Oh my gosh, you guys, there's no predictability. And that's what you wanna be for your opponent. You wanna always disrupt the application and the timing of their techniques. And it's sometimes you're going to disrupt it by slowing down the clock.
Yes.
Other times you're going to disrupt it by speeding up the clock. So there's slow clock, right? There's forcing a slow clock and there's forcing a fast clock. Both of these are the clock principle embodied.
Don't mess with my timing.
So one of the most classic examples we use of the clock principle in the Gracie Combatives course, at least, is this idea that if, let's say, Hito lands in tight side control, and I want to put him in the guard, right? I want to get out, but he's so tight, right? So you're able to squeeze and control here.
Yeah, I want to hold you tight, and I want to harm you. I want to do damage.
Correct.
So my plan is to hold tight, control, and then sit up and boom, and strike.
Right, and that in a street fight, this is a very likely possibility where you get someone on top of you whose only goal is to punch your face and bloody and break your skull into the pavement. So if Hito is here, and that's his anticipation, is to sit up and punch, look what I can do. I can just hug and hug.
And that's like,
my knee here.
I go to sit up. I want to sit up in 1 second to deliver my punch. But when I sit, not only was I not able to get to where I had to get in the time I needed to get there, but when you put me in the guard was unknown to me.
Yeah, so here's what's crazy. Because I slowed down Hito's clock of his distance creation process, at the same time, I retained the opportunity to say go in the race. So it was a velocity application on my part after a clock principle deployment against Hito. And that's the beauty, is usually after the disruption, especially on a slow clock, where I'm slowing him down and messing up his start time,
I can usually use that to slow it down and then apply a velocity plate right after, right? So this idea though, the act of preventing Hito's technique from taking effect in the timing that he wants, that is the application of the clock principle. So it's more of a defensive side to the velocity principle. This is kind of the inverse in the clock principle. Okay, so I'm here, I'm holding, I like to just kind of hang his neck very loose. I'm chilling right here. Because Hito expects to just sit up, and strike. Boom. There's just predictable timing there. Sit up and strike, right? So as soon as he sits up, if I go with him, it's already thrown off. 1 second. 1 second. Right, do it again. Go sit up. Go hit. Now I'm already out. Yes. There wasn't even 1 whole second of me hanging on you, and that still threw off all of your timing for your anticipated strikes and distance 100%. That you were going to make right there. 100%. So that was me slowing down the clock, and then I got to say go on the other side of that, and as a result, I was able to escape and recover guard by tagging along and staying close to Hito in that manner.
So, someone has my back. We land in this somewhat neutral back control position. I'm defending my neck. Sometimes I play the game of allowing, or it happens, someone wraps my neck. When my neck gets wrapped, I immediately lock down on the other hand so that they can't pull it out to finish the choke. And I throw myself to this side. I have a very wide base, so I cannot be pulled back too simply to
because what I would like to do, don't put your base. Here's now that we've created this position, what my move would be on my own clock is to keep the shoulder, uncross, push off the ground, shrimp once, shrimp twice, rip my hand out, sink the hook, and sink the choke. Okay? If I can get Hito on a cross, I can free my bottom hand, and as a result, I can finish the choke.
So Hito's creating a position where that would be my next move, and then we're going to see what happens from there.
So my neck gets wrapped, I trap down, I fall to the side. So the first thing you do is to make a very wide base and really put my weight in this direction so that it's not as easy as putting his foot down, shrimp once, shrimp twice, and pull me to the other side. No, it's actually a lot more work. Now, eventually, when he goes again, I bring in velocity.
Love that.
So I'm using velocity after first having controlled the clock of his movements and his expectations. So my neck gets wrapped. I hold this. If he tries to pull me over, like just with your hook right now, it's not strong enough.
Not enough.
But when he puts the foot in the ground and he moves his hips, I use his energy. And I pull him past. And I roll way past beyond what he ever expected.
It's so beautiful, you guys, because there's so many principles here. There's creation. Hito's creating this by pushing himself, allowing the neck on one side, controlling the wrist. There is the acceptance principle. You're accepting that eventually I'm going to get you over, and by you yielding to that, you're using my energy to cross over. So I'm helping you go to your knees. And then, of course, there is the clock principle in that the crossover in my mind that I have anticipated is not happening at the rate and the speed that I would like it to, because he's making solid base and he's resisting my progress. He's really he's slowing and essentially stopping my clock at that point. But as I insist and I insist and I insist, then he yields, but that yield is on his go. And of course, when he does so, it has a rapidity to it, a speed to it.
Yes.
That is very much a velocity principle application. So, but it all is, in this discussion, right, surrounds around this idea of I have a speed at which I want to pull Hito across, and I'm not able to do it. So it slows down the clock, and I hate that.
The same way you have a speed for what you expect when it comes to catching my arm in an arm lock.
So here's the speed I expect. I hug, I pin, and I step around, and my leg lands in the ground. There's a certain amount of time that I expect my leg to be in the air. Does that make sense? I expect to 1, 2, 3, 4, land. Right? So I expect it to land there. After a nice swing, my leg lands in perfect position, right? And if Hito understands that my clock has a 4-second clock right there, he can speed up the amount of time. Let's speed up the clock so that it happens faster than I anticipated, and that throws everything off.
Well, what I'm speeding up is the landing of your foot.
Yes.
Because like you said, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that your foot stops traveling. What if I can speed it up to where your foot travels, and at 1 and 2, it stops at 2? Go ahead, hug my arm, pin the head spin.
I love that one.
So I do a small bridge because he needs his leg to be light. He leans his weight that way so that his leg, look, it can go and come back. Look how light that leg is. Now, he's giving me his weight. So because he's giving me his weight, I now have the power to also affect his clock. And then my arm blocks just in case his leg wants to step over right now in the end. My hand is just in case, and now I sit up with awareness of triangles and follow-up arm locks.
This is a fast clock, and it's a fast clock used in the submission counter realm.